Hi, I'm Colin, and today we're going to talk about how to screed sand for pavers. Screeding your bedding sand is an incredibly crucial part to any paving stone project. The nice part about it is you only need a few basic tools to get it done. The first and most important thing is something 1 inch in outside diameter. It's also beneficial for it to be metal so that it's heavy. We have 1 inch outside diameter square tubing here. You could also use some 1 inch outside diameter round tubing. What you don't want to use is PVC pipe, super lightweight. It moves around a lot when you're trying to pull your board across. And it's also super flexible, so it kind of follows the contours in your gravel, whereas something metal would bridge those imperfections and make for a more consistent project. The next thing is some spirit level. You're going to use this to double check your rails before you screed your sand, as well as your boards, if you have a wider, broader area than the length of your level. You can also use it to check it for slope, in the direction of slope that you need. After that, you need a screed board. A good flat 2x4 will work just fine. We use an aluminum screed board just so that we know it's perfectly flat to get that good consistency. Other than that, you need a few basic hand tools like a shovel, a broom, a trowel to fill your voids with. It's also beneficial to have a flat rake around if you have one. It just makes moving fine aggregates like sand around much easier. Before we demonstrate how to screed the bedding layer, we're going to talk about the materials that you'll commonly see and that we recommend that you use. The most common is ASTM C33 or washed river sand. This is a fine sand ranging up to about some 1/4 inch pebbles and is commonly going to be wanted to be screeded moist. One thing that we see sometimes that we don't recommend is a fine, dry sand. We use this a lot to fill our paver joints because it's super fine and just fills them up really easy. But because it doesn't have those 1/4 inch pebbles in there like your washed river sand does, it doesn't screed very well whether it's dry or wet. One thing you can also use as a substitute, especially if you're in a wet climate like here in the Pacific Northwest, is a 1/4 inch crushed washed aggregate. This retains no moisture as opposed to the washed river sand, and it also doesn't get baked dry in the sun in the summertime like washed river sand does. You can still totally utilize washed river sand on a sunny day. You just want to make sure that when you screed it out moist, you cover it up with your paving stones as fast as possible to retain that moisture. Before you start screeding your bedding material, you want to make sure that your base is perfectly flat and consistent. If you want to learn more about paving stone base construction, you can watch our video, How to Prep and Lay a Paver Base. When it looks good, you can go ahead and move on to the first step, which is positioning your screed rails. We're using 1 inch outside diameter metal square tubing, and we're going to be laying that with the direction of the slope of our project. Now, width-wise, we want to be level to be consistent throughout, but we're going to lay the rails in the position of our slope to make it a little bit easier to screed. Once our rails are there, we're going to check for any humps and bumps. Anything within a 1/4 inch, whether it's a low spot or a high spot, is tolerable. You can knock your rails down for the high spots and build up a little bit of material underneath the rail for your low spots. If it's anything greater than 3/8 of an inch, whether high or low, you want to either rake that down or add more 3/4 minus or whatever your aggregate base material is to build that up. With those positioned and leveled widthwise and sloping in the direction of your slope, you can go ahead and place your sand and start dragging that across with your screed board. After we positioned our rails, we can move on to the next step, which is going to be placing and spreading our bedding material. Now we have about 100 square foot area here, and we're going to be screeding half with the washed river sand and half with the 1/4 inch crushed clean aggregate to kind of show you the differences in how they screed. With our sand that we recently placed has been all spread out, we can actually start screeding this material. Now you can totally use a perfectly flat or straight 2x4 for this part of the process. We just screed a lot of bedding material, so it makes sense to justify the purchase of a nice flat aluminum board. This is relatively simple. You're going to pull it towards you. That's just the easiest natural way. Now as you're pulling, occasionally you may encounter a rock from your base aggregate. If that happens, pluck the rock out as soon as you notice it because it can make long voids. Fill the void, however long or big it created. Take your board, Just top it off and then continue on. When you finish a section, you can take one rail out and leapfrog it over to the other section and start screeding your next section of bedding material. Now we finished screeding our first section, moving to the next step, which is going to be repositioning our rails. Instead of just taking both these screed rails out and moving them to a new area to screed the next section, we're going to reuse this middle rail, which we know is already perfectly consistent with our gravel base. It's going to make it a lot easier to take this first rail out, leapfrog it over me to this next area, double check it for grade with our level and screed board, and then screed our next section. So we finished screeding our two sections, and now we're at the last step, which is going to be filling the voids created from our screed rails. So obviously the first thing we have to do is pull our screed rails away. Then we're going to toss in some loose aggregate or sand, whichever one we use as our bedding material for the project, and we're going to top it off with either a trowel or using something like a good flat broom that can reach farther away. Regardless of which method you use, you want to make sure you refrain from walking on your bedding as much as possible. If you do have to walk out on your bedding, just try and walk on these voids from the screed rails because you're going to have to fix that area anyways. So whether you're using washed river sand or a 1/4 inch crushed clean aggregate as your bedding, if you follow our steps, you'll be left with a nice consistent bedding layer to lay whatever paving stone you want on top of it. If you want to learn more about how to do a paving stone project yourself, check the link in the description below for our project planning guide.